Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Mr. Marklevitz once again here to bring you another lecture video. Today we are finishing our unit on editing, talking about lesson 4, cuts and transitions. So let's jump right into it. All right. Now the cut is the most basic transition that we have. All right. We're on shot A and now we're cutting to shot B. Okay. It's the place where one shot ends and another begins. Now, the most typical form of a cut is referred to as a hard cut. Like I just said, we're on shot A, now we cut to shot B, all right? But there are also all of these other, specific types of cuts that we should go through so that, you know how to identify them, you know how to use them, and you understand how and why they're used, okay? So with a cut in, let's say we start with a wide shot or a medium shot of a small group of people, and we then cut to a tighter shot of a specific person or object in that original frame. That is an example of a cut in. Let's say there's, an important prop or an important detail that needs to be emphasized, right? So maybe we start, on that medium shot and then cut in to a close-up of that object because, again, going all the way back to Unit 3, the tighter the shot, the tighter the composition, the more important that, object becomes to the audience. Or let's say, again, you have a character who is, originally photographed in a medium shot, but then they say something very important or very profound. So we're going to cut in to a closer shot of that person right as they're saying, that important information. And we as an audience will understand, because of the cut in, that, what they just said is meaningful to the plot. You can also have a cut away. Now, a cut away is when we cut away from the main action to see what else is happening in this environment. So let's say you have two characters that are, embraced in this intimate moment, and then one character turns their head and we cut away to a close-up shot of a photograph on the mantle. And this cutaway is conveying a lot of information. Who is this person? Why is this photograph important? And what is their relationship to, in this case, the protagonist of our story? You can also just have a cutaway of, two people walking along a beach. Somebody says, look at that sunset. And then we cut away to the sunset, right? Again, anytime that you are cutting to something away from the main action, but still, in the environment that these characters live in, we refer to that as a cut away. You can also have a match cut. Now, a match cut is a transitional cut that mirrors unrelated subjects before and after the cut in some comparative way. In this example from 2001: A Space Odyssey, we see this ape creature throwing a bone up into the sky. We follow that bone as it travels up into the air, and we cut to this image of a space satellite. Now, these two images, the bone and the satellite, are linked not only in their shape and composition, but also thematically. They're both weapons. One is a very primitive weapon, one is a very futuristic weapon, but we recognize both of them as weapons because of the match cut, how they're shaped and how they're framed in the composition. You can also have J cuts and L cuts. Now with a J cut, you're cutting from one scene to another scene, but with a J cut, you're going to hear the audio of the next scene while we're still lingering with the first scene. So we have shot A and shot B. We're going to hear the audio from shot B before we cut to shot B.
I had to work a little harder, that's all.
You can also have an L cut, which is just the opposite, where we're going to stay with the audio from shot A while we've already cut to shot B.
I thought the yourself reference was too hokey for Lecter, so I figured he's from Baltimore, and I looked in the phone book, and there's a yourself storage facility right outside of downtown Baltimore, sir.
Again, notice how the camera cut, but we're still listening to the audio from the previous shot. It's just sort of helping the audience transition from one scene to another. Crosscuts, we already talked about last week in our lecture video on parallel editing, where the camera is cutting back and forth between, different scenes that are happening either simultaneously or non-simultaneously. And then we have invisible cuts. Now, invisible cuts are probably the most rare, but they still exist. Anytime you have a hidden edit, a hidden cut that the filmmakers don't want you to notice, but it's still there, that is an invisible cut. We see early examples from Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, where a character will, block out the lens of the camera for a very quick second. That's where the cut is happening, and then the next shot begins with them, walking away from the camera. That invisible cut is there to hide the edit and preserve the illusion that what you're seeing is happening in a single, long, extended take. But let's say you don't feel like cutting, all right? You want to show, lots of information on screen without cutting the camera. Well, there are certainly alternatives. You can do what's called the split screen. Something that we probably could have talked about last week in our unit on parallel editing, where you're going to show, parallel actions simultaneously on screen by showing both of them, all right? You have, one action on the left side of the screen, and you have another action on the right side of the screen, and both are being played at the same time. That is an example of how you can use a split screen to show two different scenes simultaneously without cutting. You can also use mats. Now, mats have hundreds of different practical purposes, but let's say you have a character who, is daydreaming, and you want to use a mat to show the audience what they're dreaming about. So you film the one person going like this, and then you film whatever it is that they're daydreaming about, and then you're going to take those two images, layer them on top of each other, and create this entirely new image, conveying the information to the audience of what this character was thinking about, okay? Other than cuts, we have transitions. Now, transitions are editing techniques used to link shots, typically between scenes, in order to show a passage of time. Some famous transitions are dissolves, fades, irises, and wipes. Now, a dissolve is a transitional device where one shot disappears while another appears. And again, typically you would use a dissolve to show a passage of time, or maybe you want to show that a character is actually a ghost. Whoa, spooky stuff, right? Now, dissolves have a time and a place and a purpose, but typically you wouldn't want to use a dissolve to cut between shots in the same scene, right? If you have a medium shot of a person and then you're cutting into a close-up of that person, you're just going to want to use a hard cut there, okay? You don't need the dissolve to soften that transition from shot A to shot B, okay? Now, a fade is another transitional device in which a shot slowly darkens and disappears or lightens and appears. And with the fade, you can fade in and out of black, which is probably the most common color, fade in and out of white, fade in and out of, red, which is an example that we're going to see in this week's film, Run Lola Run. But again, like a dissolve, you're not going to use the fade in the middle of a scene. You're not going to start on a medium shot of a character and then fade to black and then fade from black to a close-up of that same character in the same scene. That would be ridiculous, okay? An iris is another transitional device where an image contracts or expands within a small circle, typically to put emphasis on a particular part of the scene. And then we have a wipe, where one image appears to be pushed aside by the next. And if you've ever seen a Star Wars film, you know that George Lucas, he loves all of his different wipes, all right? Now, when you guys get into, your editing software, you're going to notice, hundreds of different types of transitions. But for the most part, they're all just a variation of these basic 4 types of transitions: dissolves, fades, irises, and wipes. Again, great for cutting between scenes, great for showing a passage of time. In the case of the iris, great for emphasizing a specific part of the image, but I wouldn't use any of these transitions in the middle of a scene. All right. Your lab assignment for this week, there is no lab. Yes, this is the last lecture video for this unit. So I just want you guys to concentrate on your summative project, which I will be assigning shortly. And this week we are going to be watching Run, Lola, Run. It is the only foreign language film that we're going to be watching this year. It's in German. And it's also the only R-rated film that we're going to be watching this year. Now, it is a pretty soft R. There is some violence and language issues, but nevertheless, I'm not going to make this a required film. But if you happen to watch it and you take part in our discussion, I'm happy to throw you an extra point. Anyway, guys, that's it for lesson 5.4. That's it for our unit on editing. I hope you learned something. Email me if you have any questions or talk to me in class. Thank you for watching.